You guys asked, and we're finally doing a video on the blue truck. So last time you guys saw this truck, Ian was here from Wheel Every Weekend, and we were just starting the cage. As you can see, the cage is not very much further, and there's a story to that. So I had built the cage, done it all, the roof was done, everything was good, and then we moved shops, we moved businesses, like our business moved, and there was just a lot of life stuff going on with the business and our life personally, and then I changed plans like 18 times probably since the last time you saw this truck. So everything's been in turmoil, and what ended up happening is I cut the entire cage out and I started over. So this is where I'm at with the cage now, but you might notice that there's a lot less of the truck here than there was before. So yeah, we've basically taken this thing back to, I can't even say a full cab. It's just like the shell. The floor is gone, the firewall's gone, the back wall's gone. And the reason I decided to do that is because I wanted to move the engine further back. The way the links were going, I was just doing a bunch of stuff, and I was gonna have to tie all this floor into like weird shaped sheet metal, and it was all thin and kind of crusty, and I was like, dude, it's just gonna be easier to just cut the whole thing out. So that's what I did. Do I regret it? A bit. Honestly, a little bit. I wish that I had just kept it simple and cheaper and easier, and this thing was like pretty much driving already, but this is where we're at, so I'm just gonna roll with it. But yeah, 4-link is now done. So I don't know if you watched on Instagram, but we did a little video and I talked about getting the axle and the drivetrain and all that stuff. So that's all here now, and it's mounted up. All right, so this is a JD Fab 9-inch housing. It's a full floater with 35 spline. It's gonna be running a 9-inch with an ARB locker in it, and it's full float, so that means I can brake an axle and not have my wheel fly off, which is nice. Willwood brakes, and then it is 4-link, so it's a triangulated 4-link. I got trailing arms. They're short trailing arms, they're not long. And the reason is the goal with this truck is less of like a luxury Prerunner and more of like a semi-luxury Ultra 4 truck. So this thing's gonna have 4-wheel drive. I still wanna be able to rock crawl with it, do all that kind of stuff, but I also wanna be able to go fast in the whoops. So there's compromises. It's not gonna be as good in the desert, I know that. It's not gonna be as good in the rocks, I also know that, but it's gonna be good enough for all of them, and I think it's gonna work pretty good. So some of the compromises I did to make it more rock crawly is normally you mount these lower links under the axle. It'll give you a bit better geometry for hitting whoops constantly. Instead, I mounted them to the front of the axle just for more clearance, and what that ends up doing is it makes the axle wanna tip forward every time it hits the ground or whenever the weight of the truck is on it. And so that makes all this take more abuse. So that's why I went with huge heims for the upper links, big 1.75-inch tubes for the upper links. Everything is extra beefy up top to handle that, just so I'd have like this extra 4 or 5 inches of clearance underneath. So this is my first big CAD project that I designed in the computer in Fusion 360. It's the full rear 4-link and frame kind of subassembly and link mounts. So I designed this whole thing in CAD and then cut it on the plasma table, welded it all up. This is my first time TIGging as well, so I did some TIG welding on here, so don't judge me. But yeah, so the goal here is that this truck is gonna be flat belly. So the bottom of the frame is the bottom of the truck. And I wanted to be able to slide along the bottom of the frame and directly onto the links. So that's why it's set up like that. A lot of other guys would mount these outboard of the frame or below the frame, and they hang really low. I wanted to keep everything tucked up high, and then I just made it extra robust. This is all boxed in, TIG welded. These are all overlay plated, and it's pretty beefy. I'm quite confident in these things not going anywhere. So with that, these are 48-inch links. They should cycle around 24 inches of travel. I think metal to metal, they should do around 25, but strapped and bumped, they'll be around 24 inches, which will be perfect for me. So really stoked with how this is coming together. As you can tell, I obviously cut out the back wall because the rear coilovers are gonna be inside the cab. They're gonna be right about here. I kind of mismeasured this honestly, and I gotta cut that off, but the coilover is gonna come down here, and then the bypass will be here, and everything will cycle really nice. So pretty excited about this setup. This is like really satisfying to see go from the computer to like a real thing on the truck. So pretty sick. What I'm working on right now is I'm working on this cage. So like I said before, I cut the old cage out. It gave me the opportunity. I learned some things from the first go around. There was some gappiness. There was some things I didn't really like. It wasn't as tight to the cab as I wanted. So I made a few modifications and changed the order that I did things and learned a lot, and now we're at where we're at. So I got the rear section of the ceiling done, and I'm just working on the front section now. That's what I was doing tonight actually, because I've only been building this truck in the evenings and weekends, so I don't have a ton of time to work on it, but I'm putting in as much time as I can. So yeah, the next step basically is to finish the cage, figure out how I'm gonna mount it all to the frame and like build the sliders and all that, and then this will be mounted. And once that's all welded and these frame rails are locked solid, I'll be cutting this cross member out and I'll be cutting the front of the frame off. So if you remember, I bought a brand new frame for this truck, and my idea was to use a brand new frame. And now I'm gonna have about this much brand new frame left, and everything else is gonna be custom fabricated. So that was a complete waste of money, but you know, you live and you learn. So yeah, once that's cut off, I'll box the rest of the frame. Everything will be held in place by the cage, and then I can put the drivetrain in. So the goal with that is to move the engine back. The engine will be right here. So normally an engine is basically where you are right now. And then I had built these engine mounts for the LS, and they were working great when there was a firewall here, but I cut that out, as you can tell, and the engine's gonna be probably like 18 inches back. I think the front of the motor, like the pulleys and stuff, will be around here, which is really far back. The back of the engine will be in the cab here. Like my feet are gonna be here, and the back of the engine is gonna be like here. So there's not gonna be a ton of foot room in here, but the reason you'd wanna do that is for weight balance. If you have a ton of weight in the front, then when you do a jump or something, it wants to tip the front forward. Also, when you're doing whoops, you want that front to float over the whoops, and you want traction on the back. So the front is just like whop, 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 and the rear end is stuck to the ground. So to do that, you gotta move everything as far back as you can. And a big part of that is the engine, obviously. So engine's gonna go here. I'm hoping that that will give me room to do a center mount front A-arm setup with like 19 to 20 inches of travel. Because the reason is I don't want the truck to be wider, because our trails here in BC are really tight with trees and everything else. Like, yeah, the wheels could be a little bit wider, but I didn't want a big full-size cab or anything, because you just smash it on trees. I smashed this thing enough as it is. But I didn't want to make the track width too much wider, so to get more travel, you have to make the arms longer by going in. So that's the goal. Whether I can actually make it work or not, I'm not sure yet. So it's kind of a work in progress still, but that's the idea right now. If it doesn't work, then maybe I'll do beams or something. Maybe leave in the comments what you think I should do with the front suspension, because I really want 19 to 20 inches to match the rear 24 inches. So what's the best way to do that? Because I don't really know totally what I'm gonna do here yet. So speaking of the engine, this is it. This is an LS3. Technically it's an L92 if you know what that is, out of a Cadillac, but it is the same block as a Corvette LS3, and I've changed a bunch of parts, so it's essentially an LS3. It's simpler to say LS3, so I just do. But yeah, I rebuilt it myself. I didn't take the bottom end apart, but the whole top end came apart, and obviously all the accessories and everything else. So it is running some Holley components. It's got this big Mechman alternator, which I'm really stoked on. It's got some goat built brackets here. It's got the steering pump. It's got some motion work stuff. It's got some Holley fuel rails, stuff like that. It's got a BTR cam as well and some other BTR stuff. So all in all, it should do around 500 at the crank, if I'm not completely mistaken, but I really don't know yet. So either way, compared to the 230 horsepower of the 4.0, I think it's gonna be just nasty. It's probably gonna have as much power at the wheels as it used to at the crank. That's my guess, or more. Probably more, honestly, maybe even around 300. So that'll be very, very cool. I'm really excited about it. This alternator is dope. Basically, a stock Tacoma alternator does like 140 amps at like 4,000 RPM, I think it is. This one does, well, it's tagged, they just tested it. So it's tagged at 211 amps at idle, and then 281 amps at 4,000 RPM. Which is insane, and that's gonna help power all the electric fans I'm gonna have for all the coolers. It's gonna power lights, radios, like, everything is gonna power it all. And I should be able to run a winch without like all my lights dimming like it did before. So stoked on that. Thanks to Goat Built, they really helped me out with hooking me up with all this bracketry because I really didn't know what I was doing there because I'm really new to LS's. This is really similar to the engine that's actually in Chris's truck. We just did a video about his truck. So I had a bit of a taste and I'm super pumped. Like I am frothing to drive this thing. This is the transmission. It's a 4L80 built by a local guy called RS Transmissions. He did all billet internals and new valve body and a bunch of trick stuff. Really stoked on this thing. So yeah, I'll have 4 gears, so 3 with an overdrive. It's not gonna be great on gas, but it's very stout. So that's kind of the main goal with this thing. And then back here, this is an Atlas 4. So it's a 4-speed transfer case. It's got 3/8 in it in the back case, and then in the front, it's got a 2.72. So I have a bunch of options with that. I think final drive with the gearing I have in the axle is gonna be around 110 to 1, which is really low for an automatic. But I really like to be able to just creep, and I like having the different options, especially because we do a lot of snow and stuff like that out here, or if I go in the sand, I can run like 2.72, and then if we're doing some higher speed rock crawly stuff, I can just run the 3.8, and then if I really want to get technical and do some steep stuff, I can run it way down in like the 6 something, I think it is, or 7 something. But yeah, so really excited to run this. Plus it's very strong. A lot of guys run these in their big buggies and stuff, so this will be very cool. So in the front of the transmission, there is a cone torque converter. It is, I believe, it's either 2800 or 3200 stall. And if you don't know what stall is, it's basically where your torque converter is locked up 1-to-1. So technically it's like if you held your brake and you mashed the gas, it would just spin and spin and spin until you got to a certain RPM, and then it would push the brakes. Basically the goal with stall is if you're at 3200 RPM with this thing, that's where this converter is putting the power down. So it's gonna slip, and you get to 3200 and bang, it's gonna be on. And the reason you want that is, say you're coming out of a corner and you hit the gas, and a stock converter is like 1800 stall. So as soon as you hit 1800 RPM, you're like starting to accelerate, build up, and then you're in the power band of like 3500 RPM. This thing, you come out of a corner, bang on the gas, it goes whap right to 3200 RPM, and then you're right in the power band as you accelerate out of the corner. So Or if you're in the whoops or something, you can just sit at 3,500 RPM and this thing's just cooking. The downside with that is because anytime you're lower than 3,200 RPM or 2,800, whatever this one is, it's slipping. So it's generating a lot of heat. So you want to make sure you're running really good coolers to keep this transmission cool, because the enemy of all transmissions is heat. So I'm going to be running some big coolers on this thing to keep it cool. And I will not be getting good gas mileage because I will always be at high RPMs. These are the tires I'm going to be running. I was going to run 40s, that was the original plan. I probably still will eventually, but I got a really good deal from a friend that I know on these brand new 39s. So these are BFG Cam 3 39-inch tires, and I got 6 of them. I'll probably only use 5, but yeah, these things are meaty. Really stoked on these, so they're gonna be fun. I think a lot of guys are running BFGs these days in the desert, so I don't think that they're gonna do too poorly. It doesn't look like a lot. It actually kind of looks like nothing, honestly, but I have been working a lot on this, if you believe it or not, and pretty stoked on where it's at. Really want to be further along, but you know, that's always the case. So anything I missed that you want to know, let me know in the comments. I'll try my best to answer as much as I can. And if you want to see more videos of this thing, or if you want me to specifically do a video about like one of the things I'm doing on this truck, like maybe doing the front suspension or the engine or the interior or whatever, I'm learning as I build this thing. So don't look at me like an authority on this stuff. I'm just figuring it out. So really excited though. Anything else you want to know, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.